So because we did top 10 lenses in 2023, obviously we have to do top 10 cameras in 2023. Now this video is actually sponsored by Skillshare, but obviously more on them later. Now this list is catered towards me. Now obviously this list will change from person to person depending on what you actually find valuable. Now there are some cameras in here you're probably thinking, why is that there? Well, it's because I use these cameras quite a lot. There's only one camera in the honorable mentions that I haven't used, and that is the Sony Burano, but we'll talk about that later. But yes, there are other honorable mentions which we will talk about and the reasons why they kind of didn't make the list. So let's get it. What's going on, my 103,000 amazing friends? I hope you're all doing absolutely fantastic today. We're going to be talking about the top 10 cameras in my list, and starting at number 1 is the iPhone 15 Pro. Now, you guys know how amazing the iPhones are these days, and everyone's literally got a smartphone in their pocket, and that's probably one of the biggest things of why this actually makes the list of top 10 cameras in 2023 is because I use the iPhone a lot for BTS content. I use it for travel stuff, I use it for family stuff, personal reasons, everything. The biggest thing about this is that the cameras are literally there inside your pocket, and it gives you 3 different focal lengths, which is amazing. The versatility that you can actually get out of this with the quality is just insane, because this is the first iPhone that gives you that ability to record in Apple Log or ProRes, which is incredible when it comes to image quality and grading. Sure, the file sizes are huge, but absolutely recommend the Blackmagic app, which can compress the files. You can do H.265, but you can also record in, ProRes, HQ and Light, all those kind of things. Definitely get that app if you record on your iPhone. Now, number 9 arguably could be higher, but because I do have a certain camera that pretty much shares the same sensor, it's not as high as that. So this is number 9, and that is the A6700. Now, A6700 is a phenomenal APS-C camera, and I'm so thankful that Sony have actually produced a really nice APS-C camera, because, the last APS-C camera had the 8-bit codec. They weren't really amazing cameras, but this one is just on a whole nother level. The image quality is absolutely fantastic, especially with the 10-bit codec, and they've given us 4K 120 frames per second at 10-bit 422. Like, that's just insane what kind of image quality we can actually get out of these cheap APS-C cameras. And obviously Sony are giving us a whole bunch of new lenses when it comes to APS-C, so I do think that this could be rated higher, but there's certain things like micro HDMI, 1 card slot, and only an SD card slot, so not a Type A card slot. So there's a few different reasons why I don't rate this higher than these other cameras. Now, number 8 I've used a few times, but I don't actually own one, mainly for the fact that it doesn't really shoot my style, and it's the best camera you can pretty much get in the alpha range, and that's the Alpha 1. I mean, it is a 50 megapixel stacked sensor, super fast readout, incredible video. You can film up to 8K if you want to, 4K 120 frames per second, and incredible rolling shutter performance when it comes to stills. So this camera is meant to be the flagship camera, the best of the best, but it is pretty much the same price as my FX6, and I'm not a professional photographer or a wildlife photographer, sports photographer, those kind of things. I don't do that professionally, so I do not see the use case in my use of having the A1, and that is why it is on this list, but it's not as high as some of the other cameras. Now, number 7 is actually not a Sony camera, and it's a camera that I've recently got over the last couple of months, and it's been incredible. It could be rated higher, but for reasons that I don't use it as much as I really wanted to, it's a Red Komodo X. Now, this camera is phenomenal. Obviously, it only shoots video. It's got RAW internal, so R3D RAW, which is incredible when it comes to color grading, changing any kind of colors. Just the color fidelity in this thing is phenomenal. It is pretty much unmatched because it's RAW codec. But I mean, if we had XOCN in like the FX6 or FX9, we could get very similar, but we don't. And R3D RAW is just such a strong codec. The sensor on this thing is incredible. Sure, it's only Super 35, but that absolutely does not matter. 6K up to 80 frames per second. It's incredible, the images that you can actually get out of this camera. And like I said, the only reason why I don't rate this higher is for the fact that personally for me, I don't do as many commercials as I used to, and it only suits a certain demographic when it comes to commercials, maybe some documentaries and all those kind of creative narrative stuff. When it comes to fast run and gun stuff, obviously there are other autofocus cameras that will perform incredibly well in comparison to the Red Komodo X. Now the next camera, I really wanted to rate it higher, but the only reason why I haven't rated it higher is for me, I think it's a little bit too expensive, but it's probably one of the best cameras of all time, and that is the A7R5. Now, with that 4-axis tilt screen, it's just phenomenal. You know, dual SD card slots, the ability to do 8K, high resolution, obviously because it's in the R line. It has that AI chip in there as well for the extra processing in terms of autofocus. It is one of the best cameras of all time, and if it was cheaper, I could actually utilize it instead of my A7 IV, but the A7 IV is just such a great all-rounder, which we'll talk about later. It is on this list. But if I didn't have these other cameras, the A7R5 would be rated higher. But in all honesty, it is an incredible camera, and yeah, it probably should be rated higher, but it is where it is for my list. Now, number 5 is arguably one of the best cameras of all time, and the only reason why I don't have this is because I've got the FX6. And yeah, we're talking about the FX3. Now, it has that 12 megapixel sensor that's out of the A7S III. And the functionality of this camera is just insane. It's the perfect build of all time. I absolutely love the build of this. I wish all the Sony Alpha cameras, felt like this and were built like this. Obviously putting an EVF on top, that would be great. But with this one, no EVF, but it's got internal fans. You can do Cine EI. You do have DCI 4K dual type A card slots. There's so much that you can actually get out of the FX3, and just the image quality you're getting in such a small package is incredible. And obviously the creator, the full feature length film was filmed on the FX3. So we all know how powerful this camera is. But like I said, the only reason why I don't have it is because I've got the FX6. Now, before we talk about this brilliant camera that's on the list, we have to talk about productivity, learning new skills, and that is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online community for creators. You can take a class on almost anything. You can do animation, fine art, marketing, or even productivity. Skillshare is a great online platform that is straight to the point. Teachers don't need to create content to please the algorithm. They get straight to the point and help you learn exactly what you need, which is faster and more efficient. Classes are taught by various creators around the world, and I've been learning off Hamza Khan about business and marketing, and I've also been learning off Ali Abdal. Ali has a YouTube channel with millions of subscribers and has a ton of content on here to really help increase your knowledge on so many different subjects. And one of the cool things about Skillshare is that people can actually submit their projects in the class to show their work from learning their skills within that course to other people in the class, which this is a great way to ask for feedback in how you're actually going with learning new skills. So what are you waiting for? Join us creators and upskill your level, and the first 500 people to use my link in the description below will get a 1-month free trial. That's amazing. 1 month free trial. That's so cool. Let's get back into the video and we'll talk about this next camera. And now coming in at number 4, it's the FX30. And the reason why I've rated this quite high is because the build is exactly the same as the FX3. I absolutely love it. I think it is phenomenally built. It's just perfect form factor, perfect everything. And it's got that Super 35 sensor, and I love that Super 35 sensor because it gives me extra reach, and that is the reason why I still own the FX30, because the price, that extra reach, the image quality, it's 6K that downsamples to 4K, so you're getting really high quality 4K images. Sure, the rolling shutter isn't as good as that FX3 or FX6 sensor, but it is enough. And if you do want to have a faster rolling shutter performance camera, then obviously FX3, FX6, A7S III, ZV-E1 will do, because that has that faster sensor. But I mean, you can still take 20 megapixel stills in single shot if you really wanted to, thumbnails or portrait work. You can still do that with this camera. I think it's just a phenomenal camera, and that's why I've rated it higher than the A6700, because full-size HDMI, dual type A card slots, the internal fan. It's just a phenomenal camera, especially being in the Cine line. Now, number 3 is arguably my favorite camera of all time, but obviously it's number 3, so it can't be my favorite camera of all time. But in 2023, this is probably the camera that I've used the most, and that is the A7 IV. Like, it's just that perfect mixture of great photography and great videos. Like, obviously it doesn't do amazing photography. It only does like 10 frames per second, and that's in compressed RAW, so you have to put it in uncompressed RAW to get like 6 frames per second, so that's not amazing. Obviously there's rolling shutter in video, but you can do 4K 60, but obviously the 4K 60 is cropped, so there are some cons to this. But when it comes to my talking heads, I'm always using it when it comes to taking it on holidays because it does great stills. It's just that overall, like, just amazing camera and brilliant value for what you actually get out of this thing. And I've known a lot of people actually utilizing this for professional videography, car videography. There's so many people that actually still utilize the A7 IV to its absolute maximum. And I think it's brilliant. Like, it's got full-size HDMI, it's got that dual card slot, but obviously one of them is an SD, and then one of them is that dual Type A/SD. There's just so much good things that you can actually talk about with the A7 IV and get brilliant images coming out of this thing. So now coming at number 2 happens to be the ZV-E1, because I take it with me everywhere. If I go traveling, it's so small that I literally just throw it into my backpack, and if I don't need it, then obviously don't need it. But if I need it, it's got 4K 120 frames per second. It's got that A7S3/FX3 FX6 sensor. Incredible. We all know what the images will look like coming out of this thing. Sure, there are those downsides: one SD card slot, micro HDMI, potential overheating if you have it for long periods. But it's just one of those cameras that it just has it's so feature packed. The price is so cheap for what you actually get. Like, it's way cheaper than the A7S3. It's way cheaper than the FX3, yet you get the same image quality that you can get, and it's got that new AI processor in there which gives you the dynamic active stability. Brilliant for stability when it comes to vlogging and walking in straight lines. Obviously the autofocus tracking is much better because of that AI processor. There's so much that they've crammed into that camera that just makes it worth it. And these are the reasons why. It's because I just use it so much. But in my use cases, there have been things that just, I really wish it had a Type A card. I really wish it had a full-size HDMI. It didn't have any overheating issues, but obviously it's such a small body, which makes this thing just crazy good for travel videography. So many things that this can actually be good for. But that's why it's only number 2, and it doesn't hit number 1. Now, coming in at number 1 happens to be the camera that I use pretty much for all my professional work, and that's the FX6. The FX6 literally is just an absolute workhorse. Obviously, there are cons. We all know there are cons to every camera, but, you know, doesn't have an internal audio inside the body itself when it comes to the input. No 3.5, no XLR, but when you put that top handle on, it's a phenomenal camera. This thing can do pretty much everything, especially with that internal ND filter that you can literally dial it in. It's variable. You can get it to the best exposure as you possibly can. And that's what I love about this thing, is that it literally does everything I need it to do when it comes to video. Obviously, it doesn't take stills because it's a cinema camera. It's in the Cine line. But any kind of commercial, I feel like if I use that camera, I know what I'm going to get. I know I'm going to get incredible looking images, especially if I do light it correctly. Incredible. It does have that dual ISO sensor, so you can go up to 12,800 if you really wanted to. I don't necessarily use that. I'm always at generally 800 and bringing lights in to light my scenes. I just think it's just one of those cameras that could stick around literally forever because it's high quality 4K. 4K is not going anywhere soon. Sometimes 6K, 8K is just absolutely overkill, especially for the industry right now. We don't necessarily need that as much. Obviously, if we do want to try and crop in and utilize the extra resolution, we can, and that only has 4K, but that's why it hits my number 1. Okay, now the first honorable mention has to go to the OG, the A7S3. I mean, we all know what's going on here. We all know about the firmware and all those kind of things, but regardless of all that, you still have such a powerful camera. The A7S III, you literally could use years from now because full-size HDMI, dual Type A card slots, that incredible image quality and dual ISO, it's a phenomenal camera. It literally is an FX3/FX6. It's just a smaller and different body. Incredible. So that definitely has to hit an honorable mention. Now the next one I don't physically own, but I know is actually quite good, and that's the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. Now I've had the Osmo Pocket 1, the Osmo Pocket 2, and those two cameras are very, I hold close to my heart, and I really grew this channel off the Osmo Pocket 1 back in the day. And I still think highly of them. The form factor, the ingenuity of these things is just incredible. But the reason why I haven't bought the Pocket 3 is that I don't need it. I don't really need it for anything that I do. It doesn't suit my workflow. To be honest, I've got too many cameras, and I mean, that's pretty much what my wife tells me. But if it was up to me, I'd probably buy absolutely every camera that comes out year after year. But I don't necessarily need it, but it definitely hits that honorable mention. Now another one that didn't quite make the list, and it should kind of make the list, but kind of shouldn't, it's the A7C Mark II. Like, it literally is an A7 IV, just in a smaller body. And in my opinion, I prefer the A7 IV. It hits all the marks, it does the job. The A7C Mark II is pretty much just a cheaper version, micro HDMI, one card slot, smaller body, smaller EVF. It doesn't have as much as the A7 IV does, but obviously it's got that, you know, AI processor, so it's got better autofocusing because it is a newer camera, so it's going to have newer features. But in my opinion, it's an honorable mention, but it didn't make the list. Now the next one is probably one of the biggest cameras because of ingenuity, and that's the Sony Burano. Obviously I haven't even touched it yet, but I know how powerful this camera is, and it means a lot for the industry because IBIS and variable ND filters in one. And this is one thing that could make the FX3 the most perfect camera of all time, and that is built-in ND filters. And now that we know it is very possible, sure, granted, the Burano is a bigger body. It's pretty much the same size as the FX6, maybe a touch bigger. So we all know that can, you know, fit in there, but what does that mean for the FX6 Mark II? Is that going to get a variable ND plus IBIS? That's massive, especially for run and gun filmmakers. Anyone who wants to do stable sort of shots, that could mean a lot. And obviously you can lock the IBIS if you want. If you don't want IBIS and have a steady sensor, you want that sort of true sort of motion, you can still do that. But the Burano just, it sets that standard, and I'm just excited for what's coming next after that. Now the last one comes down to another brilliant piece of ingenuity from Sony, and that's the A9 Mark III. We obviously have to talk about it because it's a global sensor, but it's not just any global sensor, it's a global full frame sensor, which is the first of its kind. And same again, it's not the camera that excites me, it's the technology that they've implemented in that camera that can potentially leak down into other cameras. And that's what I'm really excited about, is where this global sensor is actually going to end up. Is it the FX9 Mark II? Are they going to tweak a little bit to have slightly better dynamic range, better image quality through a different processor? There's so much that this opens, and it just makes me so excited for the future in 2024 and what we're actually going to be getting. But it has to be obviously in this honorable mention. So anyway, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. Obviously comment below your thoughts on the top 10, what you would actually put in your top 10, and obviously, have I missed anything that you think that really should be there and I should be using right now? But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, let's get it.